Hello everyone and welcome to another ProGuides Wild Rift video. My name is Zyrene and today we're going to be going over the mid-patch balance changes that Riot dropped on us a few days ago. This mid-patch update is actually just as big, if not bigger, than the actual patch 1.1 that Riot released a few weeks ago. It's good to see that Riot is keeping their ear to the ground with Wild Rift and it's being treated like its own project and not a side thing when it comes to League of Legends. Having mid-patch balance changes means that there are things that they think are too powerful or too weak that need to be adjusted immediately for the sake of the game staying fun for everyone. Before we get into those balance changes though, I want to drop our question of the day. What balance change would you like to make to Wild Rift in the next patch? I'm basically asking you guys what champion or item would you like to see buffed or nerfed. Don't forget to let us know what you would change about that champion or item and why. Changing something for the sake of changing it isn't good design, so I want to hear your reasoning. Now, without further ado, let's get into those mid-patch balance changes for patch 1.1. Let's start off with the changes to champions, and we'll begin with Jhin. Jhin has been doing far too well on the Wild Rift. He's been at the top of the ADC tier list, so changes to him are absolutely warranted. His starting attack speed is being reduced from 0.75 to 0.66. His attack speed growth per level is being increased from 2.2% to 3.2%, which means his attack speed finally catches up at level 15, making his early and mid game much weaker. His attack damage growth per level is also being reduced from 5.5 to 4.55, making his level 15 attack damage 177 instead of 196, which is quite big considering his abilities really rely on his attack damage, and of course his crits like to dip into that AD too. But Jhin has been too out of control that base stats and stat growth nerfs to his attack speed and attack damage aren't enough in their eyes. Jhin is also having his third ability, Captive Audience, nerfed when it comes to its slow, being taken down from 45% to 30%, and the cooldown on his ultimate is being increased from 80-70-60 to 95-80-65. All of these changes hurt Jhin throughout all stages of the game. His early game power has been far too dominant, and this definitely hits him heavily in that department. The biggest worry I have is the base attack speed nerf is going to make him feel incredibly clunky at first for players, but maybe people will be able to go toe-to-toe with him now in the laning phase. Next up, we have another marksman, but this time it's a buff. Varus is receiving some buffs to bring him in line with other marksmen. His movement speed is going up from 325 to 330, and his second ability, Blighted Quiver, is having its cooldown reduced from 30 seconds to 25 seconds. Its buff duration increased from 4 seconds to 6 seconds, and the damage is being increased by 0.5% maximum health damage, bringing it from 3, 3.5, 4, 4.5% max health, to now being 3.5, 4, 4.5, 5% maximum health damage. Overall, this small change to Varus gives him a nice window of extreme power with his Blighted Quiver. But keep in mind, this ability's active is still a 25-second cooldown. That being said, Varus was already in a good spot in our opinions, but he definitely isn't as easy to play as other marksmen with his lack of mobility and dependence on skill shots. And speaking of skill shots, our final marksman change of the patch is another nerf, and it's to Ezreal. Riot legitimately must have the same tier list as us because Ezreal was our other OP marksman alongside Jhin. So Riot's giving him a nerf as well. His passive Rising Spell Force attack speed is being reduced from 12.5% to 10% attack speed per stack. His first ability, Mystic Shot, is having its damage reduced from 20, 55, 90, 125 to 20, 50, 80, 110. And his third ability, Arcane Shift, is having its cooldown increased from 19, 17, 15, 13 to 25, 22, 19, 16. These are actually massive changes to Ezreal. Riot is nerfing his ability to trade with autos through his passive, nerfing his ability to poke you down easily with his Mystic Shot, and also making him way more vulnerable at all stages of the game with the 6-second longer cooldown on Arcane Shift rank 1. Ezreal players are going to have to play it really safe now, and using Arcane Shift offensively is going to be punishing not just for the wave that you use it, but even for the next wave after. So the window in which you can be jumped on is a lot larger now. It's always a little sad when Riot nerfs the fun marksmen like Jhin and Ezreal, but it's understandable when they're just that much better than the rest of the field, and that they're fun to play on top of it. And when it comes to things that are fun to play, we have changes to 2 assassins up next. First, it's Akali. This champion has been a little on the weaker side in Riot's mind, and we're inclined to agree, even though the thought of buffs to her kinda makes us shiver. Her base armor is being increased from 30 to 35, her passive Assassin's Mark is having its bonus movement speed increased from 40% to 50%, her second ability, Twilight Shroud, is having its cooldown reduced from 20 seconds to 18 seconds, and its bonus movement speed is being increased by 5% at all ranks, bringing it from 25, 30, 35, 40% to 30, 35, 40, 45%. And finally, her third ability, Shuriken Flip, is having its range on the projectile she fires off increased from 7 to 7.5. All of these changes seem aimed at making Akali harder to abuse in the early game. It seems that Riot thinks she does alright in the mid game and late game if she's played well and has someone skilled piloting her. But she doesn't make it to that point in the game unscathed frequently enough for their taste. Increasing her armor, movement speed on 2 abilities, access to her escape tool, and the ability to close gaps just a little bit more are all going to make her much better against champions that want to basic attack her from a range. She'll still struggle with magic damage dealers, but the bonus movement speed she gets from her passive will be what lets her connect with her enemies and let them no longer have a range advantage over her. Like we said, Akali changes are always scary to us, but we feel that none of these are aimed at her damage, so we're hesitantly okay with all of these changes. The other assassin receiving changes is Evelynn. Riot is increasing the range of her first ability, Hate Spike, from 5 to 6.5, and the AP ratio is going up from 40% to 50%. This may seem like a small change, but keep in mind that Evelynn shoots out 2 lines of hate spikes when she casts the ability. So this is really an increase of 20% to the AP ratio of the ability, and on top of that, she can recast the ability within 4 seconds to send out an additional 2 lines of spikes. So if she lands all 4 rows of her hate spikes, which isn't hard to do at all, especially with the 1.5 increase in range, it's an additional 40% added to the AP ratio of the ability. Assassins gaining more damage is always daunting, but we think Evelynn needs this change. It isn't a change to her base damage, so she won't be clearing the jungle faster during the early game or anything like that, but she's definitely going to be able to keep up with other champions during the mid game. And for an assassin, sometimes that's all they need to start running away with a snowball. Next up, we have changes to some junglers other than Evelynn. Once again, Riot is doing a really damn good job of targeting the champions that are clearly in a league of their own, and they've targeted the 2 champions in our OP jungle tier list, and one of them that is in the S tier. Amumu is the first one up. His second ability, Despair, is having its damage reduced by 10 at all ranks, bringing it from 20, 25, 30, 35 to 10, 15, 20, 25. And also having the stun duration of his ultimate Curse of the Sad Mummy changed from being 2 seconds at all ranks to 1.5, 1.75, and 2 seconds. The damage loss on Despair is big for his early game and his damage output, but the Curse of the Sad Mummy stun duration nerf is a decent hit. I wouldn't say that it knocks him off the tier list right away, but his team fighting is going to take a very slight hit. The other champion that was in our OP tier list for jungle is Lee Sin, and he's getting a change to his scaling to make it so he's not as mobile or safe in the late game. His second ability, Safeguard, is having its cooldown changed from scaling down by 1 second per rank at 15, 14, 13, 12 seconds to just being 15 seconds at all ranks. The shield value is being nerfed from starting at 80 and increasing by 80 each rank to being 60 base and increasing by only 60 each rank, taking it from 80, 160, 240, 320 to 60, 120, 180, 240. The follow-up ability of Safeguard called Iron Will is also being nerfed. Its damage is going down dramatically from 55, 100, 145, 190 to 50, 75, 100, 125. And the physical damage and magic damage vamp on it is being taken down from 40, 60, 80, 100% to 35, 50, 65, 80%. Riot clearly wants to make Lee Sin do about the same amount of damage, but not be as mobile or safe in the late game. I think we all agree that the 320 health shield on a 12-second base cooldown before ability haste was just too much to handle on top of all of Lee Sin's damage. I like that they didn't hit the damage of his primary combo too much and mostly focused on bringing his mobility and survivability down. The issue I have with this change though, almost all of it is geared towards his mid and late game, which is not where Lee Sin is proving to be a problem. Lee Sin is just insane right now from the get-go. This will make it so Lee Sin is more tailored to being an early game champion and allowing people to potentially come back against him. And I guess that's a good place to start, but I expect him to require another balance change in the future. And for our last jungler, we have Gragas. He just got a buff to his ultimate to make it land faster, so he was weak, right? Wrong. Riot thinks he feels less clunky now, and because of that, he's finding a lot more success. So reverting the buff to his ultimate definitely isn't the play here. It'll just make him feel like doo-doo again. So they're nerfing his base health by 40, taking it from 690 to 650. Nerfing the ability power ratio on his first ability, Barrel Roll, from 80% to 70%, which keep in mind also nerfs the amount of damage it does when it ferments. Increasing the cooldown on his second ability, Drunken Rage, from 4 seconds to 4.5 seconds, and reducing the AP ratio on his Explosive Cask ultimate from 80% to 70%. Overall, these changes seem to be okay, Gragas has always struggled with the identity of being a big, burly guy who builds ability power and has to go in, and he's usually far too powerful when he never has to commit to a fight and uses Body Slam, or he's able to one-combo somebody. So lowering the AP ratio on his barrels makes it less likely that he's able to combo someone down without having to commit his body to melee range. And when he does, that 40 less health will make a bit of a difference. It's never fun to just get 100 to 0'd by somebody who threw a few barrels at you from a range that you couldn't do anything about. So these changes seem pretty fair. Now we have our last champion change, and it's to Blitzcrank. Blitz's base mana is being reduced from 345 to 300. His base mana regen is being reduced from 15 to 9, and his mana regeneration per level is being reduced from 1.1 to 0.7. His passive mana shield is having its cooldown increased from 50 seconds to 80 seconds. His rocket grab's projectile width reduced from 1.5 to 1.0, and its damage reduced by 20 at all ranks, bringing it from 80, 140, 200, 260 to 60, 120, 180, 240. And finally, his second ability, Overdrive, is having the duration of its self-slow increased from 1 second to 1.5 seconds. These are a lot of small changes to Blitzcrank, and they are all targeted at making him less reliable. Right now, it isn't risky to run up, launch off a hook, and run back. First off, it usually hits, so the nerf to the width of it is pretty good. Second, he would just get all the mana back so quickly, and if you did turn on him, he almost always had his passive mana shield up, and it seems like Riot wanted to nerf all of that and throw in an increase to the self-slow on Overdrive just to make it that much riskier to try and make a hero play with Blitzcrank. It's no question that Blitzcrank is strong right now and near the top of the tier list for support. I mean, is he the strongest support? Not really, but is he really high in terms of his play rate and win rate? Yeah, absolutely. And Riot likes to look at how easy a champion is to find success on when you first pick it up. This will make it harder to get that first win on Blitzcrank and fall in love with him right away. So his win rate will definitely go down, but players that have mastered him will stick with him and not feel too much of a change. Now that the champion changes are out of the way, let's talk about the changes to items. Both the percent armor penetration items of Last Whisper and Mortal Reminder are having their penetrations reduced by 5%, bringing Last Whisper from 20% to 15% and Mortal Reminder from 35% to 30%. Tank items feel a bit weak in Wild Rift, and these items were countering the builds that already felt bad to build. Next, the 1000 gold boot enchants are being reduced to 800 gold. Riot feels like everyone is just picking up the cheap boot enchants and not saving gold for the more expensive ones. They want to test and see if the power of these enchants is actually worth the price point they put on it, or if they're just weak in general. So Teleport and Stasis, that's the Zhonya's Hourglass active, are all having their prices reduced by 200 gold. On the flip side of enchants that are too expensive to pick up, Riot is increasing the cost on the Quicksilver enchant from 500 gold to 800 gold. This makes a lot of sense for two reasons. Quicksilver is just way too powerful to have access to for just 500 gold on top of your boots. We talked about how QSS counters a lot of champions in the PC version of the game, but it costs a lot to buy and takes up an item slot, so it feels pretty bad to build it there. But the Quicksilver enchant solved both of those problems, so of course it's going to be really powerful. And the second reason it makes sense is because now it has the same price point as Stasis, which directly competes with it in most people's minds. You either get out of the CC with Quicksilver, or you become golden and dodge it, or incoming damage. Now you actually have to weigh which one you want, instead of defaulting to the much cheaper one. And finally, we have the changes to the game's systems. Riot is directly nerfing the experience the duo laners receive, from 75% to 70% of the experience. This means that every minion that you killed and shared experience in a lane with was worth 150% of its normal experience value if you shared it. Now it's worth only 140% of its normal value. This makes the game less dependent on snowballing your duo lane and getting them ahead. The other changes to the game systems deal with jungling, sorta. People have been taking Smite on laners to grab camps easily and even counter jungle. The experience snowballing has been brutal to deal with, and Riot has always tried to keep Smite out of the lanes and in the jungle. So taking Smite now will make you gain 20% less experience from killing minions for the first 5 minutes of the game. The other changes to the jungle are 30-second increases to the respawn timers of Baron Nashor and Scuttlecrab. Baron now respawns after 3.5 minutes instead of 3 minutes, and Scuttlecrab now respawns after 2.5 minutes instead of 2 minutes. Riot felt that you cycled the jungle, then went to the crab, and just kept doing that over and over again, with just a 2-minute respawn timer. There wasn't much breathing room for junglers who have to farm and gank to actually get a foothold in the game. It felt like you were always missing out on something, even if you were dominating the game. This change will allow people who get ahead in the game to actually control the map as their reward, and not have things get taken and slip from out under their nose. And that's it. Wow, those are a ton of changes for a mid-patch update. I pretty much agree with every change that Riot made this patch, so it's by no means a bad move, but it's definitely a lot to have to balance. The thing about mid-patch updates that are always a bit daunting is they've most likely locked the 1.2 changes by now, so if any of these changes end up being a bit too much or too little, they'll have to introduce another mid-patch update in patch 1.2 to address that. But here's to hoping these all go over well. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Don't forget to like, comment your answers to our question of the day, and subscribe for more updates on patch changes, tier lists, and more. Have a great day, and I'll see you in the next video.